let's look briefly at the history of call. You can read the MESCL pages if you haven't already done so, and if you want to pause the video and do that, you can go ahead. So MESCL lays out some of the basic advantages of using computers, their patients, their role as drill masters, and so on. And she goes into what computers can and cannot do. Some of the boundaries of what they can't do are getting pushed a little bit, I think, but essentially, I think her account is accurate. And for the personal history here, I just indicating that I've lived through these stages of call. I wrote a book on computer orientation for foreign language learners in 1987. In the late 80s and 90s, I was selling software at TESOL, and there were a band of enthusiasts, Philip Hubbard and Mark Warshaw, Carol Chappell, and so on. We were younger in those days, and trying to promote the use of computers in language learning at TESOL and other places. So we can look at the stages of call. The diagram comes from Mark Warshaw, and it's useful to kind of have some kind of table like this, although you can always question what goes in each of those little boxes. So he's divided into three periods, and then the different aspects for each period. So we look at the technology. We went from the mainframes, the kind of big central computer, to the PCs, the multimedia and internet. The web is a better word there than internet. And I think it's interesting now with cloud computing, we're actually kind of going back to something similar to a mainframe idea, where your local computer contains less information, less software, and so on, because it's stored somewhere else, which is kind of like a mainframe idea when you had mainframes and these so-called dumb terminals. For the English teaching paradigm, certainly we had the autolingual method here and grammar translation in the early days, and communicative language learning during the 90s. Here it says content-based, or maybe task-based learning is the paradigm that we're adopting these days. And obviously there's some kind of overlap. I was teaching content-based English in the late 80s in Saudi Arabia. View of a language was, here we have this kind of structural view, formal systems of sounds of language and the syntax and so on. And here labels it as kind of more cognitive or a mentally constructed system, and here socio-cognitive, more interaction. Again, if you think about it, these things are again kind of blurred across these three columns, but there is some development in this direction. Principal use of computers with during practice, that's certainly true. Communicative exercises, so a lot of kind of information gap exercises during the 90s. And here authentic discourse, and perhaps we have the computer mediated communication coming in. We're going to be using Hangouts and so on, and email, and etc. You can argue about the word authentic in classroom activities, but perhaps a move towards more authentic discourse. And the principal objective is accuracy. So a lot of the drills were focused on accuracy. It's true. So fluency, meaning, well, you wanted the students to be talking, perhaps under Krashen's influence and so on. And there's less focus on the accuracy. You're trying to set up situations which would get the students first listening and then interacting and talking. And the agency here is kind of maybe related to tasks again and kind of doing things with the language. And I suppose from my perspective, one thing I want to say is that you know, there's tends to be with younger researchers to kind of view the past as bad and the current as all good, and I tend to be a bit dubious about that. I mean, there are kind of improvements, but you know, here we had the kind of audiolingual method, and you know, plenty of people learned language using the audiolingual method. It's not like, you know, this kind of 60s and 70s and 80s were kind of failure, and we're only seeing the light these days. And I suppose, you know, one way of viewing that is that you can only do so much with the instructed language. I mean, people take language classes and they learn the basics, and they need to get to a certain level and then kind of be able to interact with native speakers, or you know, go abroad or whatever. And you know, the kind of extended language learning takes place outside the classroom in various ways. And so you know, when we're teaching language, we're not really trying to teach the whole language, trying to give people some skills, some knowledge, some way of getting started in their extensive reading or their interactions with native speakers, and so there's many ways into that, and yeah, we can look for new ways of doing that, but I think there's a kind of a mixture of new ways and the ways we've used in the past.